Okay, this is the second tutorial video in the series where we're going to show you how to use the tree core system. So this is going to be from capture and then process the data, and then we'll show how to arrange it all in a subsequent video. So there are a few things I just want to bring up that I didn't mention in the overall setup, just because I thought it would be a little bit too much information. But one of the things I'd like to just show you, these mounts here are intended if you have a very long sample. It adds some added support, so you can actually screw these on the same way that you screwed the adapter, and what they'll do is you can slide these up or down. That way if you have a really long sample, there's not a lot of stress on it, so it's not bending. It will just keep the whole sample level. The other thing we have here is additional batteries for the flash. We have a set of Allen keys and wrenches for the entire system. So basically that box there is an entire set, looks like this. We also have an external AC adapter, so this allows you to plug the camera directly into an AC port on the wall. That's in this box here. This is a pack that allows you to recharge all of your AA's. And then we also have an external light like I have here, which just is useful for setup and not necessarily capture. I just wanted to show those materials. In the meantime, I'm just going to set it aside. And instead of actually using the AC power for the camera to actually do this, what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be using a battery pack just for the slight demo. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a battery, we're going to insert that into the camera body and then close the door. Okay. The other thing I want to mention is that having tape around is very, very useful. The reason for that is because when you're capturing an image of the sample, you do not want the light to come into contact with the surface that you're photographing. It's going to create too much glare, especially at this magnification. So the idea is to reflect all of the light off of the diffuser on this objective here and then reproject it onto your sample. So if you just take a piece of tape, one of the things you can do to help block out any direct light is just cover up the front edge with that tape. What that does is it just kind of creates almost like a gutter or just a ledge for light to actually miss the surface of your sample. The other thing you can do is extend these arms. So this basically just puts it in a better position so that the lights again are coming into contact with the diffuser and not the front of your sample. So we're just going to extend that out slightly and then close it up. Okay. So the USB-B cable is already connected. Now what I need to do is just turn the camera mode to automatic. Automatic allows us to see what we're doing when we turn the camera on. The moment you turn the camera on, it should form a connection with the computer and open up EOS utility. That's if the battery is charged, which it doesn't appear to be. So what I'm going to do is just grab a different battery here. Okay, let's try this one. Okay, there we go. So there's the battery and there's the software opening. And then what we're going to do is just select remote shooting. So remote shooting is going to allow us to see everything that the camera sees. So first thing you want to do is just open up a live view shoot, and this is going to be designed to set up and configure the first image. Okay, so settings. With the MPE65, let me just roughly go over those settings. Always an aperture of f4, exposure 1/200, ISO between 100 and 400, and then adjust your flash according to brightness. With the 70 to 200, you want to use an f2.8, and you also want to set the zoom to 200 millimeters. 200 millimeters basically is allowing the light to move through the lens and come into perfect contact with your camera sensor. You want to make sure automatic focus is off. You want to make sure all the stabilizers are off. And that way there's no internal motors that are pressing against the glass that could actually change the location of the optics between focus stacks. You want to set the focus to infinity. So just like you're focused on a landscape, what you'll do is you'll just turn this, from my perspective, I'm turning it clockwise right now. So the next thing we can do is actually start to bring our sample into focus. So everything should be very level. We can move the x-axis here with precision, and we can move the y-axis here with precision. What we're going to do first is pull the sample a bit closer to the objective until we start to see the material come into focus. And there you go. So now we're starting to actually resolve the tree rings. Now I talked about this desk light. Like I said, it's good for use in positioning. So what we can do is just position the light so that it forms against the sample here, and we get a better idea of what we're looking at. Again, and this is again another good reason or a demonstration why we don't use this light. Any motion this has actually appears that the sample's vibrating, but really it's not. It's just where the light's coming from. It's changing and appears to vibrate. So now what you want to do is, just to make sure that the surface of this is level, you're just going to move all the way down the length of the core sample. And you can see we're starting to go out of focus a bit. So the idea here is to actually loosen up this Allen. And we're just going to try to, just with our hand, just sort of maneuver the core sample until we actually get it right about there. So we're going to bring it a little bit forward until it starts to come into the field of focus. And this is really just more or less for alignment. And we'll tighten it back up. Pretty close. Again, bring it all the way down to the edge of the bark. Now we're just going to move all the way back to the other side and see how close or how far away we are from the focal plane. And here what we can do again is loosen up the Allen. You can see we're very, very close. So again, a lot of this can just be achieved with your focus stacking, but it's nice to actually have it set up level, just because it means that you're taking less images overall. There you go, so that's pretty close. So now what we're doing, we're focusing on basically the left side from my perspective, right side from the camera's perspective. And what we want to do is just set up our parameters. So I'm going to go to the x-axis and I'm going to press the up arrow, which brings the sample closer to the camera. You can see everything's in focus. I want the focal plane to just not just go beyond it, but actually go a little bit further, just to account for any variation or any areas that aren't completely level or parallel with this one. So that'll be a start position. Now what we're going to do is actually, again, we're going to overshoot the focal plane as we come through that edge of the bark, and that's going to be our set. So now it should say press start to begin along the x-axis. What we're going to do here is we're going to change the number of steps so that we take 100 individual photographs through that material. Now what we want to do is set up our y-axis. So we're on one edge of the bark. So now what we want to do is press set on Y. We want to move our core sample until we're focused on the other edge of the bark. Press set, that's the end position. And now we want to change the number of our steps. Now there's a few ways to do this. One is you could actually measure the length of your core, and then you can actually measure the length or the field of view that you have with basically the 20x objective. Now the field of view that you have is basically just under 2 millimeters. So that means that if you have a 20 millimeter sample, then you should have a step set of 10. And that means that you're basically creating a panoramic of 10 images. For this one, the other thing you could do is just sort of play it by eye. And first what you can do is, let's just say we want to set it up so that we're taking 50 images and I can hit the check mark. So before sort of moving along, one thing you could do is, and without syncing to the camera, what you can do is basically unplug the remote shutter and just set that to the side, and then you could press start, and what it's going to do is it's going to move all the way to the other side of the bark, and then it's going to move in increments down. And you can see how much it moves on the screen, and you can see if it's going to generate enough overlap for you to actually use that information to stitch it together. And it looks like 50 is going to do it just fine. You can see that the bands are moving and we're still in focus. It might be okay to maybe play it a little bit safer, maybe do 65 and just hit start again, and then we'll see how much it's moving once more. And then just kind of focus on shadows and areas that you notice. You can see that there's a band there as we move it to the right. you can start to see that there's some significant overlap there that we can start to utilize. So that's a pretty good setting. That's how we can do that there and set it. The next thing you want to do is press the Y. So you want to change the axis, and it's going to say what we're going to do here is now we're going to combine the axes. So basically this is X to Y, and right now it says full stack before going to Y and return to X after one step, and they're both ready. So if you want to just change the settings, it's very intuitive interface. The first question says, do you want to link your axes together? Yes, I do. I want the X and the Y axes to link. So okay, we'll start with the X axis. Does the X axis step once before moving on, or complete the entire stack? In this case, that's the focal stack. We want it to complete, so you'll press complete. Now for the Y axis, when it is ready to move, does it step once or complete the entire stack? It's going to step once, and then it's going to allow you to do a focus stack, so you want it to just step once, you'll press step. It'll ask you if you want to include the Z axis. In this case, we don't touch it, so you'll press no. From this screen, this is where you want to press start. Before you do that, you just want to make sure that all of your settings are correct. So you want to take your camera, you want to take it out of automatic mode, and you want to place it into manual mode. Then from here you can turn your flash on, and you can turn the light off that we were using in order to position the sample. You want to come over to the computer screen, you want to shut down the live view, and you want to open up a quick preview. This just allows you to see any photographs that you're taking. It's going to be set to AWB, that's an automatic white balance. What you want to do is set a light diffusion white balance, so that's the two triangles and the solid rectangle. You want to set the exposure to 1/200, the aperture to f2.8, and the ISO will start with 100. The other thing you want to do is set up the directory. So this is where all of the images are going to be sent. And remember, what we're doing is, I think, I can't remember exactly yet, but we're taking 100 photographs per stack. And we're doing that 65. So that means that we're going to be taking, 6,500 photographs in total. So we're going to just place it back to the X and the Y screen where the axes are linked. And we want to set up a directory. So I already have one just set up on my desktop. I've opened the folder, and now I just want to click on the folder in the remote and go to browse, and I want to find that directory. So I place that under active 2D, active, and then I called this folder TreeCore. So we're just going to go find the TreeCore folder, TreeCore panorama, press OK. And now all of my photographs are going to be placed in that directory. The next thing I can do is just take a sample image, and we can see what the lighting is like. And that's pretty darn good, except the flash is going to be set to an automatic mode. It's going to be ETTL. What you want to do is change the mode by pressing mode on the flash, go to manual. It's going to be automatically set to 1/1, which is the most power. You want to hit select, and then you want to take it to probably something more like 1/8, and then give that a test. And what that does is it keeps the flash constant. It's not constantly changing on you. Take another test shot and see how the light varies compared to the prior image. It's a tad bit brighter. That's a good thing. It means that it's going to conserve the flash batteries, and it's going to conserve them even more if you just take it a little bit more on the other side. So what we're going to do is take it a tad towards 1/16, so a little less bright. And again, you can get away with this more if you mess with the ISO a little bit. So what I might actually do and advise you to do is go up to just about 1/32. Take the ISO up to about 250. Take another picture and see how bright that is. And that's pretty good as well. So by doing that, what we can do is actually extend the life of the batteries in here. So what we're going to do now, we're going to delete the folder where it was just allocating those images. So shift delete, yes, and now we're good to go. So what we can do is take our power cord, our shutter cord, plug it back into the camera. On the controller, press start. Now what it's going to go do is it's going to set up back from the beginning, first edge of the bark, and it's going to take its first focal stack of images. It's going to run through, take 100 photographs through the material, and then it's going to pan over, and then it's going to do the same thing and simulate that until the entire image is captured. However, there's something else we can do here. You can see how slow this is running. So I'm just going to pause this, and I'm going to show you how to speed everything up a little bit. On the main screen, there's a hammer and a wrench. If you click that, it's going to take you to a series of menu options where we can start to adjust this. So right now, the mode is on stacking. What we want to do is go to the axis settings, and we want to change the settle time. Right now, it settles 2 seconds. That's too long. What we want to do is take that down to basically a half a second. So what you can do is 0.5 seconds or 500 milliseconds. Stack speed, that means that's the rail. Right now it's 5 millimeters a second. We'll take it to 10 millimeters a second. Forward backward speed, 10 millimeters a second. That means the whole thing is going to be more reactive. It's going to move a lot quicker for you. None of the other settings need to be changed here. They're all okay. But now what we need to do is change the shutter settings. So right now there's shutter 1 and 2. We're going to go to shutter 1. And that is going to allow us to change the timing of the shutter settings. So here's the shutter output settings. So basically go to shutter output, 500 milliseconds, 500 milliseconds. What we're going to do is just take that to 250 milliseconds across the board, all of these. So 250, 250, and 250. Basically means it's going to be twice as fast. Okay, then that was shutter 1. We'll also just adjust shutter 2. You're not going to use shutter 2, but it's good to actually just set it up so so that it will move faster for you as well. All done. Hit the house, which is the home button. Hit the x-axis, hit the y, hit the z, and take it right back to the x and y. What we can do is, because we kind of stopped and reset, the controller remembers the settings, but we can delete the folder where we were currently sending images. Press start, and now you can hear how quick it's going to be. So you can see it's capturing images much faster. So that's going to speed up your workflow. It's going to take a task that probably would have took about 4 hours down to less than an hour. So now what you can do is, on the computer screen, you can take a look and you can see the focal plane move through the subject. When you look at this, you want to make sure that the focal plane isn't moving too much. You want to make sure that there's a significant amount of overlap here, so that when you actually move down and you stitch the image, there's no areas in the photo that are out of focus. So you can also see that with 100 images it's a bit overkill. We've already gone through 30, but again, if you sort of add that buffer, so a little bit on the beginning and a beginning on the end, then that buffer is going to just ensure that you've captured everything in focus as you move down core. And after you've sped it up, it's kind of good to go ahead and do that. So that's the capture process. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let this run through and maybe about 3 frames just for you on video, and then I'm going to show you how to break up the folder. So while you're here and while you set it up, the first thing to do really is just separate out the very first folder and just call it 1. And the reason for that is because at the end of all this, all those images are going to be stashed in the same folder, and you need to break it up because you need to break up every single basically focal set. So there's a program that actually does that for you, but when you say that there's 100 steps here, there's not actually 100. That's 100 steps, which means it's taking 101 photos. So there's going to be some discrepancy. It's always good to just initially run through the first stack. There's 8 more photos, and then just rename the folder before it starts capturing images on the second round. Because that way there's less steps, especially when you integrate other axes. So here we go, we'll just change that one, enter. And now what we do is we have our first folder, and now it's created a second folder, and it's going to go through, and again it's going to generate, a second folder with another set of stacks. So in the end, now what we know is that there's 100 steps, and we are running along, and we're taking 65 individual images, which are going to form to generate the panoramic photograph. So what we need to do in the end, since we have already created 1 folder, is create 65 more folders. And the reason you do that is because basically it's stepping 65 times, which means that there's actually going to be 66 final images to generate the panoramic. But you always add 1 to that number. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be separating this folder by 65, despite having already moved out that first folder. So again, I'm just going to let this run through. I'm going to do it about 3 frames. We're going to come back to the computer, and I'm going to run through a few frames for you and show you how to do that. We'll do the post-processing and all that material in a 3rd video. Again, thank you very much for following along, and thank you for choosing Macroscopic Solutions.